Okay, so this video is a skill builder video. This is going to talk about the stitch and flip method. Many times in your quilting patterns you're going to find that it's easiest when you're doing a flying goose block, or you're trying to put a corner on something, a snowball block, those kinds of things. The instructions will tell you to do this method. And it's probably because it uses more fabric, so it's not the most efficient use of fabric, but it also is the easiest to explain, which is why you see it a lot. So this block that we're doing in $5 quilt, for the reason I'm doing the skill builder, has several of these. And the first thing you always need to identify is which blocks that you've cut are going to be stitched and flipped, okay? And what do I mean by stitch and flip, so it doesn't seem so crazy to you? And so what's going to happen is we're going to place a square equal to the corner, and we're going to sew from corner to corner, and then when we're done, we're going to press this up and make that corner match, and that's going to give you your finished corner, your stitch and flip. Okay, so that's where the word comes from, stitch and flip, because this is going to flip up to fill that corner. So the first thing you're going to do is, once you identify what size squares you're going to be flipping, and in this block it happens to be 1.5. A lot of times they're half of the block and they fill up and they crisscross in the middle. This one doesn't. This one is more like a snowball block where it's just filling the corner. So you're going to take your square and you're going to put it right side down on your mat. And Michelle's going to zoom in here. And this is kind of a pain in the neck, but it does make a difference to draw the line. So I'm going to place my point tip on there and move my other ruler so that it dissects the point, the end of the ruler. And then I'm just going to draw a line, okay? So I've got a line drawn. Now you're going to have to do that on all of the squares that you're going to be stitching and flipping. Now, if you have a good center line all the way on your stitch plate, all the way up to the needle, sometimes you can avoid this and you can just eyeball it. But if you want to be really accurate, and this block requires you being accurate, you probably want to draw that line. And you're going to go ahead and draw those on, and it's going to be light 1, and then you've got print 2 squares that you have to draw that on. And I'm always trying to be real careful, because if I go right through that diagonal, my pen's going to be slightly off. So I always have my ruler just a little bit off to make sure my pen is dissecting all the way through. Accuracy does count with this, okay? So that's how you mark them. Now, to sew them, I'm going to take this square right here, and actually, I believe this one has the white ones. Then you have to determine, when you go to sew this, which direction that needs to flip. Now, if it's going to fill the corner, that's pretty straightforward. You're just going to place this up here. And if you're not sure, for example, if you put it like this, and you sew this line, if you look, when I flip it, it either goes this way or this way, which is not accomplishing filling that corner. So I always like to say, if you remember to put the line so it goes from the top inside to the bottom outside, if that makes sense, then you'll know you're going to be flipping up into that corner. Now you're going to sew on this line, and that's another little hint that I have for you. When I sew these, I usually sew just on the inside, the corner part of that line. Because when you go to flip that up, sometimes, and you can see this, and I don't know if she can zoom in enough, but you can see my line, and my stitching line is just, it's really almost looks like it's on it, but it's really just one right on the other side. Because when you flip this up, remember, you're going to have this fold here, and you want to be able to make sure that this corner fills in. And what I do is I make sure that it lines up perfectly with the corner, And then, let me get my finger out of the way, and then I take my iron and I press it in place right where it is. This may not be the most perfect seam in the world, but what's important is that this ends up filling this corner so it's 3.5 inches. So I'm going to finger press that so you can see that. And then you're going to do this on the other side. And again, now see if I just pressed that, look at the, can you see the difference there? This doesn't line up with that, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to force that to be equal, and then I'm going to take my iron and I'm going to put that seam in there so that I know that's up there properly, okay? And so then I'm going to have this pretty little corner filled, okay? So, and that's what we're accomplishing in the, what do I want to say? When you are putting the corners on the print, you're going to be using the background and you're going to be putting them so that they are both at the same end. When you're putting them on the background fabric though, and I guess this is for the next video, we're going to be putting them on opposites. Sorry about that. All right, back to this skill builder. All right, now what do? We've got this done, and some people will just go ahead and sew this in. But look at this, you've got 1 layer, you've got 2 layers, and you've got 3 layers. Now, it used to be I recommended that we trim the middle layer out. And you trim it down to about 1/4 inch, and I'm going to show you that and just rough guess it. But the problem with that is now you see the shadowed fabric. Okay, you see the background shining through because we're using a light color here. And so what I have done with all of mine, and I did use my little ruler here, is I went ahead, once I had it pressed and I knew it was filling the corner properly, I just cut both the back layers away, kind of. There we go. And now when I press that up, I have this really pretty corner. It's not super bulky, and it fills that 3.5 inch square. And I'm going to do that on the other side also. One of the other reasons I chose to trim both away on the block that we're making is depending on where these are sewn in and where if there are match points, you don't want to have 3 layers of fabric where these match because that just makes it really difficult to get them to press and match and look nice. So there's your 3.5 inch square. Now, sometimes I will take my square ruler and put it down and check it to make sure it's square. But if you've been, fairly careful with the pressing, you're going to be in good shape. So, and so that's what we call stitch and flip. Now, sometimes this square is big enough that it actually overlaps, and when you flip, you have a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, and that's important too. We see that when we do this method for flying geese. So. Stitch and flip, and you're going to see this a lot in a lot of quilt patterns that you purchase because it's easier to explain than cutting the squares and sewing them and then hoping that they're lined up and they're straight. So that's called stitch and flip.